loves, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I'm Rye and this is Rye's Reading Corner. Today I'm going to be recommending you some of my favorite young adult series. So young adult books have been one of my favorite genres for as long as I can remember. So I wanted to share with everyone some of my favorite YA series in hopes that maybe we can bond over some of my likes in series, or you can find some new series to read for yourselves. So I have cleared out my bookshelves, as you could tell by like the gaps and stuff, of some of my favorite series. So I have a wide range here. I have fantasy, I have contemporary, I have some science fiction. So I'm just going to start. Some of these I have talked recently in other films and videos that I have come out with. So I will be posting the cards, those videos, so you can kind of learn more about them. But I'm not going to try and say too much about them because I have a lot. So the first series I'm going to go over is the Red Queen series by Victoria Wayward. So I did not grab the whole series down for this because it is some massive books towards the end. So if you're not familiar, this is a fantasy series. There are 4 books in the series, and it follows our main character, Mare, and she is a red blood for as long as she is known. So red means you have no type of magical powers. In this society, if you are a silver blood, that means you have some pretty amazing magical powers. So shortly, she does find out, though, that she is not just a simple red blood. She is a red, but with silver powers. So as you can probably see, that goes an interesting way. So this series is great. There is a type of romance in here. There are twists and turns in this book. This is really the fantasy series that I would say made me want to try fantasy, because before this I was not familiar with fantasy. I even didn't buy the book at first. I read it from a library ebook. Fell in love with the series and had to buy all of them. I now have a special edition copy of this book. It is a great series. If you like fantasy, there is kind of that chosen one trope in here. If you like that, if you don't, I think you would still like this series though. It is a great, and I think it's good for people that are just also getting into fantasy and want to read this, because that's kind of the boat that I was in when I read this one. All right, so the next series that I would like to recommend all of my lovely viewers is One of Us is Lying series, and the One of Us is Next is the sequel, and this is by Karen M. McManus. So I did just talk about these in my thriller recommendation video, so I put that card up above so you can go check that out. But just quickly, this is about, I believe it's 5 teenagers that get put in detention, and they come from all different groups in the high schools, and they all come together, and while they're in detention, one of the kids dies in detention, and they all become suspects. So it's trying to figure out who actually killed the boy that was in the detention. There is some mixed media in here, which is always fun, one of my favorite parts to read in books is that have mixed media. It definitely has a lot of twists and turns. I really enjoyed this book. The next one follows sibling that was for one of the main characters in here, and we do see a presence of some of these characters in this book, which I really like. And again, it is trying to figure out another type of mystery that's going on in their town that was connected some ways to the crime that happened here. So the stories link very well to each other. If you like mystery type books and young adults, I highly suggest this little sequel here for these 2 books. I really enjoyed it. All right, so the next series that I would like to recommend you all is Killing November series by Adriana Mather. So I really like her. I feel like she's a really underrated author, and I talked about her in a video that I did a couple months ago, and I'll post that in the tags, where I wanted to kind of shout out some, I think, underrated authors and books. So our main character, November, obviously, is just randomly dropped at this academy for pretty much training assassins. And in this world, or this book, it pretty much says the reason certain things have happened in history is because people that have went to this academy, killings of famous kings and stuff, were done by people from this academy, which I think is really, really cool. So she's dropped here. She has no reason why. Doesn't understand. She's lived a typical life, and she's trying to figure out why she has been brought to this academy, and as well as she's trying to now fit in and be trained as an assassin. So Hunting November picks up great from this. This is kind of like a quest that they have to try and figure something out before someone dies, and it's almost like a treasure hunt type thing. It's really hard to kind of explain without going much into this book, but it's really cool. It's like I said, it's a mix between like this assassins, and then there's like different family clans that go with this, but it's like, I don't know. It's just really good. If you like assassin books and trained assassins, I think you'll like this series. So I actually have another series that I would like to shout out by Adrienne Mather, and that is How to Hang a Witch. So I read this book, I want to say maybe like 2 years ago. I am really interested in like the Salem witch trials type things, and this book has to do with the Salem witch trials. So one thing I love about Adrienne Mather is she takes her family history and like things that have happened like to her family and then integrate it into her books. So she does actually have ties to the Salem witch trials, which is super cool. So our main character, Samantha, has just moved to Salem, Massachusetts, and when she gets there is targeted by a group of girls that are descendants of the witches that were killed, or the people that were killed and accused of witchcraft during the Salem witch trial. Also, which is what I really liked about this too, so during this time that she's dealing with these people that don't like her, she's also has some spooky things going on in her house with a ghost that's super stubborn, and she can't let him go, and so like that's a really cool aspect. And then they find out that she has family connections to the Salem witch trials, which was why descendants were so against her in the beginning, and some of their history comes back and comes to like haunt them, and they have to deal with the aftermath of what her family has done and what has happened in the Salem witch trials. So it's really cool. It has some fantasy type elements in it, but it is set like in present day Salem, Massachusetts, which I thought was really, really neat. So this is a perfect read coming up for October or like even September to get ready into that spooky mood. So then it goes into Hunting in the Deep, and this is now talks about actually the history of the Titanic, and it does have reference obviously things that happened in the first book because this is a sequel, and she does it brilliantly. So this also does have flashbacks to actual things that were happening on the Titanic. So it's definitely a mix of fantasy, historical fiction, contemporary type issues that happen in both of these as well. I loved this series. Again, I think it's a series that doesn't get enough recognition, but if you're looking for a great kind of spooky series to start with that, September, October, I would highly recommend this series. All right, so my next young adult series that I would like to recommend to you is one that probably most people have read, and it is The Hunger Games. So I have this in a beautiful box edition, but I feel like when The Hunger Games came out, there was like a bunch of books that were coming out during that time, like Divergent and The Maze Runner, all kind of came out like afterwards. And I feel like The Hunger Games is one of the series that has withstood the time from when it was first published. I've read it again several times, and I love it every time. I'm not talking about the prequel novel that was just released. I'm talking about the original 3 novels. So if you're not familiar with the Hunger Games trilogy, it is about in a society where there's all these different factions, and it pretty much ranges from super wealthy and rich to extremely, extremely poor. And every so many times they do the Hunger Games, which pretty much you fight to the death of whoever survives pretty much is, granted fandom and money, and your life completely changes. So our main character, Katniss, gets herself involved into these Hunger Games, but she does not believe in the typical Hunger Games, and she wants to play it to work for her, and she kind of goes about doing the Hunger Games differently, and it's just a great series. I absolutely love the strong female representation of Katniss in the Hunger Games. I'm not going to go much more into it because I feel like everybody knows that even if they've not read the book, but it's one of those series from that time era where like all those books are coming out. Like I said, Maze Runner, Divergent, all those, that I would definitely recommend this series probably the most out of all the other ones. All right, the next young adult series I would like to recommend is Suzanne Young's Girl with Sharp Sticks and then Girls with Razor Hearts. There are 2 books in this series right now, but there is going to be a 3rd one I believe coming out. I don't know exactly when. Suzanne Young is one of my favorite authors of all times. I will be mentioning another one of her series as well. I feel like she's another one that does not get enough recognition that she deserves because her writing is done so brilliantly. I just love it. So this is about a school that if you are lucky enough, you get to go to. It's an all-girls school, and they pretty much treat you as you are men's property, and they are shaping you to just obey men and how they're supposed to be. And the men pretty much go and like pick the girls that they want and like condition them for them. However, our main character does not buy this. She does not like it. She doesn't want to be some guy's property, and she feels like there's some other kind of things that are going on in this school that she wants to kind of uncover. So this story is about her uncovering what the school is actually doing, and it is shocking. I did not expect the twist in this book, so I don't want to say much more because going into these books blind is the way to go. I was so utterly surprised. There's an adorable romance in this story. It's not like the prominent fixture in this book, but it is a great book. It is a science-y fiction type book, but you don't really get that until more towards the end of the book. But this series is so good. I would need to eventually get a hard copy of this book because I like my series to match. But I highly suggest this book. It is a weird, like, the society kind of reminds me in the beginning of like The Handmaid's Tale a little bit, but with like teenage girls. But it definitely takes a turn that's like totally not like The Handmaid's Tale. But it is a really good book. It's an unexpected book, and it's weird, and I highly, highly suggest it. All right, the next series I would like to recommend is probably my favorite series that ever. I don't have all 6 books with me because I did lend some out and never got them back. So, which is a tragedy. So I have to buy them again. And it is the Program series by Suzanne Young. I feel like I take any opportunity to talk about these series whenever I can because I feel like they are so underrated. So there are 6 books to this series. The premise of this series is about a town where depression and suicide has kind of taken over, and they're losing a lot of teens to suicide. So if you admit yourself or your parents think that you're just too sad, they call, the program comes and picks you up and plops you in this program. It pretty much erases all of your memories besides like certain things like who your parents are and like who you are, but you can't remember anything else really. And the effort is to erase anything that could cause sadness, and you pretty much start over again in the hopes that you will, not commit suicide. So the first 2 books of the series follows our 2 characters, James and Sloane, who were a couple prior to having to go to the program. And so the story is them kind of to undercover like what's really going on in the program. They are trying to come back together because some of them do remember some stuff because of things that happen. It's just amazing. Then the next 2 books in the series, so books 3 and 4, talks about what happened before the program started. Like how did they get to that point? And then 5 and 6 talks about what happened after the program, and they're all connected, and then all the characters are mentioned in the books. It is just so fabulously done. Like when I first read these books, I was really sad because it didn't follow the same characters in books 3 and 4, but I was totally okay with it because it's just so well done, and they all reference all the characters, and they all come back together, and it's just so amazing. And I highly suggest to read anything by Suzanne Young. I think she's underrated, and she's one of my favorite authors. I mean, I've read over 8 books by her now, and I love every single one. So please pick up this series. It needs more recognition. All right, the next series that I would like to recommend is an adorable romance series I feel like everybody knows about, and that is P.S. I Love You by Jenny Han. This, I think, was maybe, it was a popular series beforehand, but once the movies were made on Netflix, I feel like the series has just blown up, and which is obviously amazing. So, this is about a girl who wrote all these letters to crushes that she had, and then her sister sends these letters out in hopes like that something will happen and that her sister will be happier. And one of them is sent to like the high school's like hot guy who everyone loves, Peter. And they end up fake dating to get back at Peter's ex-girlfriend and to not have everybody know that she, Laura, actually had a pretty big crush on her older sister's boyfriend. And the fake dating obviously leads to something else, and this series it's a great series. It's a fun series to read. It's cute, it's lighthearted, it's an adorable romance. It's a 3-series trilogy, and I highly suggest if you haven't read this, do read it, even if you have watched the movies, because especially the second one, it's nothing like, I don't feel like it's anything like the book. It's definitely pretty drastically different. So I highly suggest picking these up even if you've already watched the movies. Alright, the next series that I would like to recommend to you is These Witches Won't Burn and This Coven Won't Break by Isabel Sterling. So there's currently 2 books out. There's also a novella that's like a 1.5. It kind of talks about something that happened in the first book, and it actually goes into more detail of it. And sorry guys, I'm getting uncomfortable here. It goes into more details about an incident that happened in the first book, or that we hear about it in the first book, but we don't really know like much happened. And then it's an ebook. I think it's free online. It's really, really good. And she's also writing a 3rd one to the series. So if you like witchcraft, if you like reading about a book that has queer representation, I highly suggest this series. So we have our main characters here. We have Hannah, who is a witch, and she's currently trying to get over her ex-girlfriend Veronica, who's also a witch. And we learn more about how their relationship fell apart in that 1.5 book, which is really neat. And they're just trying to be average teens, but something is happening in their town where they aren't sure if it's another witch coven or if it is witch hunters. And so they have to work together to try and figure this all out, while trying to also hide to her other friends and another girl that she's starting to like that she's actually a elemental witch, which means that she gets her power through like the earth, wind, fire, like things like that. This is a great story, I think, that brings in fantasy, coming of age story. It's just great. Like, it is such a great series. The second one I actually liked even a little bit more than the first one, which I feel like doesn't usually happen, but it is such a good series. I've heard a lot of people enjoy them as well. So again, a perfect pickup read for if you're going into a spooky season. And I did talk about all this in a lot more depth in one of my wrap-ups, and I'll post that in the cards above. All right, the next series that I would like to recommend to you is Wayward Children series by Shawnee McGuire. So I feel like, again, big time series everyone talks about. It is a fantasy series about children that are able to go through different doors into fantasy worlds. However, most of them have not stayed there their entire time, so they go back to a school to try and adjust back to normal life, as well as keep looking for their doors. So this series starts off with introducing, in the first book, kind of just what happens when they go through these doors, a bunch of different characters, and the actual school. Then the other ones in the series alternates between going into more depth about some of the characters, like what happens before and during their time in a world, and the other ones kind of brings all the characters back together, so they go on kind of like different missions almost. I love this series. I think Shawnee McGuire is such a talented writer. Again, they're quick books, which is always really nice, and I love going into the fantasy worlds that she has created. She also has a next one, I think it's the 6th one that's coming out next year, so definitely read these before it comes out. All right, the next young adult series I would like to talk about is another one that is hugely talked about on BookTube, and that is Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman. So this series is just the cutest thing ever. It is about 2 boys who figure out about a relationship. So we have our main character who was outed as gay, I would say, I think the year before. And then we have our other character here who's on the rugby team, who's never really thought of himself as being anything else but straight, but once he meets our other main character, he starts to question his identity because he has feelings for him. So these books kind of go through his struggle of trying to, what's his identity and how does he now identify. It also does about some mental health, like cutting and depression and eating disorders. And it also, just the romance itself is one of the cutest romances I've ever read in any type of book before. This is really my first love of a graphic novel. I just absolutely love these series. And again, she does have another one coming out next year, so read these before that comes out. All right, the next young adult series that I would like to recommend to you all is the Selection series, and I talk about this on my channel literally all the time, so I'm not going to go much into it. So yes, I know the Selection series is actually a 6-book series, but however, the first 3 are kind of what I clumped together because I feel like they're the better of the 6 of the series, like the other 3 books in the series. So this is like a cross between The Bachelor and The Hunger Games. So we have a society where, again, they're divided up by like means of how much money they have and like their profession, kind of like The Hunger Games. Our prince is looking for a bride. It's like what they do in the society, and they have to get like put into like a lottery. She goes and she doesn't want to, but her mom really wants to, and her love that she has back at home is saying that like this would be a great way to get some money to be able to help him. Sarah is going to start reading, of course, while I'm recording. So, while she goes there, she does get selected, and she goes, and there's all these other girls from different sections of their land, and she's from the poorer end. However, she goes in thinking that she will never find love, that she is already in love with someone. However, that doesn't happen. She ends up falling in love with the prince. But this series is just really great. It's a fun series. It's a lighthearted series. I just recently reread them and I still love them. These are the books that I go to if I'm in a reading slump. These are the series that I go to because this makes me smile and I love them. And I feel like you should give them a try if you haven't already. All right, the next young adult series that I would like to recommend to you is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. And the sequel to that is A Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. So this is about a young girl who had a really interest in two kids that were, one was definitely murdered and the other one, they didn't know what would happen to her. And she feels like the person that was framed for or said that was guilty for the girl gone missing or disappeared or killed, they don't really know, was actually not really guilty for it. So for her final big year capstone project, she wants to investigate those crimes and try to figure out who really hurt Andy. During this, she investigates it herself. She does also develop a relationship with the accused brother. I think that's the way I want to say it. And it's a mystery, and she pretty much is like a detective, and she's only a senior in high school. And things definitely get out of hand at times, and she kind of gets too involved in it, but her mission is to make sure that who was really convicted or who was said to have been guilty of this crime is actually guilty, or is he really not. This book was so good. It had a lot of twists and turns. I did not expect the ending for the most part of what happened, which I really don't find is common in young adult thriller mystery novels. I feel like it's pretty obvious, but this one definitely caught me off guard. Then we go into the sequel, Good Girls, Bad Blood, which I had to order this because it's actually not released in the United States, which made me really sad, but I eventually would like to get a hard copy to match. This picks up from this story really, really well. And this is a multimedia format because there is a podcast involved with this. So we get a lot of podcast elements in it, which I love. And she has been asked to try and figure out another disappearance of her best friend's brother. And she is really, really reluctant at first because things did not necessarily go so well. At the end, a lot of damage to her family and just, and a lot of enemies were necessarily, were kind of made while she was investigating the crime in this book, but the police and the detectives don't say they don't have time to investigate this because he's older and not necessarily considered missing because some of this behavior is typical for him, but she doesn't believe that, so she takes into her own hands to start investigating it. I think this book again goes really well right into the second book, and it's a good YA thriller mystery type book. All right, the very last series that I would like to recommend are one of those series where I always am hesitant to tell people about that I actually kind of enjoyed because it's I don't know, it's kind of funny, but I read this series for a college class. It was I had to do an author study for young adult novels, and it was airing the last season of Pretty Little Liars, and so I was I wanted to see how it compared to the books, and which are completely different. And I actually really liked the books to the point where I read more of the series than I actually had to. So this series is extremely long. I have not read the entire series, so I won't try and say here that I have read the entire series. However, I did read a good chunk of them, and I've actually really enjoyed them. So it is the Pretty Little Liars series by Sarah Shepard. I must say all the books come in really pretty colors too. I have them all stacked up, but they're bright colors and looks really pretty on a bookshelf. So if you're not familiar with Pretty Little Liars, about a group of friends whose best friend goes missing when they are in high school, I believe it was. It's been just not a long time. The thing is, the book and the series are so different. So even though you've read or if you've watched the series, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen if you haven't read the books yet. But this series is just a fun series. It's a fun mystery series as they're trying to figure out what happened to their friend. And as they're trying to figure out, they're getting random, threatening, blackmailing texts and letters from someone named A. And they don't know who that is. And they're trying to figure out at the same time what happened to their friend, as well as who is sending them these awful text messages and letters. It's about kind of also the friendships that, they had been quite strained prior to their friend going, or after their friend gone missing, and kind of them coming back together. And it's just a great series. It's a fun series to read. It's not like the best writing you're ever going to read, but it is a fun series, and it's definitely is different than the TV show. So if you have watched a TV show, maybe pick this one up. So I know that's like tons of recommendations, but like I said, I've been a diehard young adult fan for a very long time, so I've read quite a few series. So I have read more, but these are just some of the ones that I really wanted to highlight today. So if you've read any of these series, let me know your opinions below. If you think I should read any other series that are in that YA genre, leave them down in the comments below. So if you've liked this video and you want to take this journey with me, press that subscription button below. Also, if you never want to miss any of my content, press that alert button. And if you liked this particular video, give me a thumbs up. And all my social medias down below if you want to be friends on anything else. And yeah, so stay kind, loves, and I'll see you later. Bye!
Special, pretty up from the minute that I met you.